Good afternoon. I want to welcome you to this ministerial meeting, bringing us together around the topic of the reinforcement of cultural policies.
Autour des principaux enjeux
So,
de la culture,
dear ministers, you can share your insights on the main topics with respect to culture
qui font que le secteur
and main challenges as well as guidelines and insights of the cultural sector in order to make it more open to participation and more inclusive. We would love to hear from you your insights on what culture can do in terms of cultural diversity, as well in terms of equality for access for everybody. That is access to culture. I want to remind ministers and vice ministers in the presidium that you will have 4 minutes to share your ideas, and observers will have 2 minutes for comments. So with no further ado, I'll ask Her Excellency Chantal Mournour-Knight from the Minister in the Prime Minister's Office from Barbados to take the floor.
Buenas gracias. Buen día a todos. Director General of UNESCO and other officials of UNESCO, Excellencies, Ministers of Culture, distinguished delegates, cultural officials, cultural stakeholders, and cultural practitioners, specially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, I greet you. First, let me thank UNESCO and the Director General for creating this space for dialogue, sharing, and collaboration, centered on the overarching theme, cultural policies and sustainable development. We are also appreciative of the regional consultations which presented member states with the opportunity to reflect and regroup after an intensive and extensive period of the COVID-19 pandemic and the attendant protocols. One of the lessons from the pandemic is that there is as much inherent value in reflection and conversation as there is in the busyness of doing. I also wish to thank the government of Mexico for hosting this meeting and for the effort that you have taken to ensure that we all experience the warm hospitality of the government and people of your country. 4 decades after the first Mondiacult, this conference and its theme is acutely relevant for the world that we find ourselves in today. It is a world of contradictions, filled with uncertainties and challenges, but at the same time offering a unique opportunity for disruptive innovation and new ideation that can forge resilience and embed sustainable systems for change over the long term. Certainly, Barbados, as a small island developing state, facing the existential crises of climate, debt, and health, and I will add a 4th, population growth, or the lack thereof, fully understands the imperative of the moment and the importance that culture and strong cultural policies can play in galvanizing, engaging, and propelling our societies towards the vision of sustainable development that we all aspire to. We would agree that the COVID-19 pandemic was a moment of reckoning for the cultural sector. In a tourism-driven economy, when profitable employment for many cultural practitioners is seasonal and highly dependent on state-driven activities, the pandemic highlighted the fragility of the sector and gaps in supportive policy. While the sector showed itself to be both dynamic and flexible in this context, the project of resilience building or future-proofing and transformation requires a fundamental shift in our approaches if we are to meet the imperative at hand. Our approach to meeting the contemporary challenges facing the cultural sector to strengthen an adaptive cultural policy is underscored by 3 principles. 1, greater emphasis on demand-driven policymaking. 2, creating a whole-of-government policy framework which furthers the recognition of culture as an undergirding pillar and essential element of addressing our development challenges. And 3, engaging and empowering our populations to embrace and value their culture. The three critical core challenges that we are in the process of addressing for upscaling of the cultural sector are: one, increasing capacity and reducing the peripheralization of the sector, as we have recognized that we must further strengthen our cultural policies to ensure that they are inclusive and responsive on multiple levels. As we have attempted to pivot in the context of COVID, we have acknowledged that inclusion must be more than participation by actors in the cultural sphere, but rather it must be marked by a sphere which imbues ownership, moves away from elitist frameworks and entrenched voices, and embraces the full spectrum of the diversity of actors in protecting and preserving our cultural heritage. Our cultural policies must also address the digital divide, which was exacerbated by the pandemic. While the digital transformation has opened up access to the consumption of cultural goods, services, and entertainment within and across nations, economic and social challenges have meant that some actors have been excluded from participation in the cultural production and consumption because of the digital imbalance and unequal access to ICT. Third, and I know the time is up, but I'll finish shortly, building data-driven policy is one of the key challenges for governments generally, and in the context of culture, this challenge is magnified tenfold. And while this is not a new challenge, certainly it has become more urgent. This is not about data for data's sake, but the connection between data that helps us to measure, analyze, and monitor in the context of scarce resources and the need for a strong evidence-based sector that supports policy conversations for scaling up multi-sectoral linkages, particularly with tourism and education. Colleagues, what undergirds this for all of us is that as we fundamentally strengthen our national policy-making processes to be more responsive, what is also required is an effort and a shift in the approach to the treatment of culture at the international level. If we agree fundamentally with the importance of culture, we must do more than sing kumbaya or simply say it is so. The expansion of the cultural industries is one area that Barbados and other states can have a competitive advantage. And it is interesting, one of the areas for which the scale of resources and full recognition is nascent. The international community must do with culture what it has done for all other multilateral processes which are deemed important. It must put its money where its mouth is. There must be a loud and clear international reiteration of its importance through increased prioritization in the envelopes of development funding, including grounding it as a critical element in trade and critical climate negotiations. In closing, I want to remind us that we're gathered here over these 3 days to work together to design a future where cultural rights are preserved, cultural diversity is promoted, access to cultural goods and services is facilitated. Our constituents are depending on us. I therefore look forward to ongoing deliberations where we can share best practices and strategies that lead to tangible results for all. Thank you.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. La parole est maintenant à Madame la Ministre de la Culture de la Colombie, Son Excellence. Merci, Madame la Ministre. La parole est maintenant à Son Excellence, Madame Patricia Elia Ariza Flores,
Her Excellency
Ministre de la Culture de la
Patricia
Colombie.
Elia Ariza
Madame la
Flores,
Ministre,
Minister
vous
of
avez
Culture
4
of
minutes. Je
Colombia.
vous remercie.
Muchas gracias.
Madam Minister,
a todos,
you have 4 minutes.
agradezco a sus excelencias, los ministros
Well,
y
we want
ministras
to thank
de Cultura, a
ministers,
todos y a todas.
my colleague
Vengo a hablar
ministers,
desde
and today
otro
I'm going to be
discurso.
talking about
Hablar desde América
from
Latina,
another
en
point of view, from
particular,
another discourse
desde
from Latin
Colombia,
America, from
un
Colombia,
país que aunque tenga
a
nombre de
country
paloma,
that even
no
though
está
has the name
todavía
of a dove,
en paz.
is not yet in peace.
Estamos transformando la
We are
cultura
transforming
porque queremos pasar
culture
de ser un
because
país
we want
condenado
to
a
go
la
from
guerra,
being
al
a
narcotráfico
country
y a la
condemned to
exclusión
war, to
para
exclusion
hablar
and
de
drug
un país
trafficking,
que quiere
and
ser,
then be a
como dice
country
nuestro
that
presidente
wishes to
Gustavo
be,
Petro,
as
una
President Petro
potencia
says,
de la vida.
a power of life.
La cultura no es una
Culture
mercancía,
is
no es
no
un
good,
adorno.
is
Vengo a
no
decir que
accessory.
estamos en una crisis
So
profunda
today we are
que se
in deep
manifiesta en el
crisis
mundo
that is
con un
observed
profundo
worldwide
malestar
with
en la
deep
cultura. Ese malestar nace de
distress
vivir con
in
un solo relato,
culture. That is because
de
we
que los
have only
países
one story, and that
de
is that
neocoloniales
countries of
tienen
neocolonialism
un solo relato y
still
quieren
have one
imponer ese
story and
relato.
want to impose that story on the
Esos
rest.
países están
Those countries
extrayéndole
are
las entrañas a la
extracting
tierra.
the
Crisis
core, the
quiere decir
guts of our
oportunidad.
land. But still,
Vengo a hablar de
crisis
las oportunidades
opens
para el
room for
mundo y para mi
opportunity.
país,
Therefore, there's
que se llama
opportunities
Colombia.
for my country and for the
Esta no
world.
es una
This
oportunidad,
is no
quizás sea la
sole
única
opportunity,
oportunidad
but it may be the
para
only
la
opportunity
cultura.
that we have for
Vengo a
culture.
invitarlos
So
a que
therefore, I
enderecemos el discurso,
summon you to change
a que
what
volvamos a
we
pensar la
say and
cultura
go
desde
back
su
to
capacidad transformadora
conceiving culture
y
as
no
a
desde su
transformation
lugar
driving
de
force and
compraventa.
not only as something
Quisiéramos
that
que
is
nuestras
good to be
culturas se
purchased.
colocaran en
Our
el alma de las
culture should be
naciones
at the
y de las
core
personas, que se
of
colocaran
countries,
en
of
el corazón de
people,
los
and at the
pueblos.
core of
Existe
peoples.
otra manera de
There
habitar la
are
tierra
other
y
ways
estamos
to
a
live
tiempo,
on
pero
earth,
el
and we
tiempo
are
corre
still
veloz.
in time.
Una
However,
manera
time goes by
es
very,
que
very
el verde
fast.
vuelva a ser de todos los
And
colores,
the green should
donde la
be pretty
cultura,
much of
las
all
artes y
colors,
los
where
saberes
culture,
vuelvan a
where
tener un lugar,
art
su lugar
still
profundamente
holds
transformador.
its transforming
No estamos en contra de las
position.
industrias
We are not
culturales o
against
creativas.
cultural or
No
creative
estamos en
industries.
contra de las
We are not
empresas,
against
pero si se acaba el
companies.
clima,
But if
si nos
climate
vienen las
is
sequías y las
exhausted, if
inundaciones,
drought and
no habrá
flooding
empresas, no habrá
is
capital, ni
everywhere, there
economías
will not
creativas,
be
ni
creative
nada.
economies or
Quizás
creative
sobreviva la
capitals.
cultura.
Perhaps culture might
A
survive.
eso nos referimos,
That is
a
what we
construir otro
refer to
relato
when
de
we
la
talk
cultura,
about
donde lo
creating another
principal
story
sea
for
la vida
culture, where
humana,
the main thing
la
is
paz en el
human
mundo
life,
y la
peace
creatividad.
in the world, and creativity.
Tenemos que volver a la
We
noción
need
de
to go
cultura
back
como
to the
motor
notion of culture
transformador de
as a
la
transforming
historia,
driving
o
force
mejor,
of
volver la
history,
mirada a las
or
culturas,
maybe
los saberes y
turn
las artes.
our sight
Una
towards
cultura donde
culture and
quepan los
art, a
saberes
culture
de
where
los
we can
pueblos
have the knowledge
originarios,
of our
afrodescendientes,
forefathers,
indígenas y campesinos.
Afro-descendants,
Esto es posible y la
peasants, and
UNESCO
everybody. And
tiene
this
una
is possible
responsabilidad
because UNESCO has
histórica
a
en que
historic
esto suceda.
responsibility for
No
this to
somos un
come true.
mundo solo
We
de
are not
bienes
a
y
world of
servicios.
goods and
Somos
services.
muchísimo
We
más
are
que
far
eso.
more than that.
Servimos para pensar y
We
para crear
we
sociedades
create,
del
we
conocimiento,
create
sociedades de la
societies of
creación.
knowledge, of creation.
Yo soy artista
I
y
am an
ministra y vengo
artist,
aquí a
I am a
ocupar este
minister,
lugar
and
en
I'm
nombre
here
del
before
arte,
you on
pero
behalf
sobre
of
todo en
art,
nombre de
but
la paz de
above
mi
all on
país.
behalf of the peace of my country.
Queremos que renazca la
We
vida,
want
pero
life
vivir no es solo respirar
to be
o
reborn.
acumular.
However, it's
Vivir
not
es
only a
recuperar la
matter of
capacidad de
accruing, a
llorar
matter of breathing,
frente a una obra de
it's
arte, frente a un árbol.
to be
Es la
moved
capacidad
by
de
a
cantar
tree,
en
by
las
a piece
noches
of art,
y de
and
conversar.
singing and
Amigos
chatting and
y
sharing.
amigas de
My
la
dear
UNESCO,
friends from UNESCO,
necesitamos construir un
we
nuevo
need
discurso.
to have a
Hemos
different
vivido la
discourse.
guerra
We
y
have
por eso tenemos la autoridad
experienced
para
war, and
construir la
therefore
paz.
we have a saying when it comes to
Queremos
peace.
prometerle a
We want
García
to
Márquez,
promise
nuestro
Garcia
gran Nobel,
Marquez, our wonderful
que
Nobel
Macondo
Prize,
vivirá
that
y que no
Macondo
tenemos
will live
por qué estar
and that we
condenados a otros
should
100
not be
años
condemned to another
de
100
soledad.
years of solitude.
Que estamos luchando
That
por
we
tener
are
una
fighting
segunda
to have a
oportunidad sobre
second
la tierra,
chance
una
with
segunda
our Mother
oportunidad para el
Earth,
arte,
another
para la vida.
opportunity for art and
Traemos
for
un
life.
mensaje
We have
de nuestro
a message
presidente
from
Gustavo
our President
Petro.
Gustavo
Les
Petro.
prometemos
We promise
que seremos una
that we
potencia de la
will be
vida y
a
de la
power of
cultura.
life and
Muchas
culture.
gracias.
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Et maintenant, nous passons à Son Excellence, Monsieur Tarvi Sit, Secrétaire général du ministère de la Culture d'Estonie. Monsieur, la parole est à vous. Vous avez 4 minutes.
Mr. Sitz, you have the floor and
Dear
4 minutes.
executives of UNESCO, ministers, honored guests, and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to thank UNESCO and Mexico for hosting this ministerial conference. There could not be better timing for such an event, as the world is faced with extraordinary challenges. Without fully recovering from the effects of the pandemic, ongoing armed conflicts and wars, the economic, energy, and climate crisis are threatening cultural landscape. We appreciate the work done by UNESCO to facilitate and promote continued access to culture. In an increasingly interconnected world, artificial intelligence and digital technologies have a strategic importance to the resilience of the cultural sector. They offer innovative solutions which have already changed how cultural content is created, accessed, and used. We are actively engaged in the digitization of processes and services in the field of culture, which allows to significantly improve their availability and usability, both in Estonia and internationally. We appreciate the new possibilities, especially for artists of smaller states with a once limited distribution area or for reaching smaller communities outside larger centers. Estonia has been focused on mass digitization of cultural heritage, and we have been successful in laying the basis for cross-disciplinary cooperation. The digitization, availability, and preservation of cultural heritage should be based on the needs of the users. Our goal is to reuse Estonian heritage innovatively in creative economy, tourism, and science. However, a new challenge is how to preserve heritage in an energy-efficient manner. Estonia has analyzed this aspect in our cultural institution with a view to diversify the sustainable means of digital long-term preservation. Dear delegates, the COVID crisis highlighted the need to strengthen the financial and social resilience of the cultural sector. The issue of social guarantees for artists is important in this context. Culture starts with them, but current system in many countries results in underpaid work and untaxed income. Therefore, we must stand up for the socio-economic conditions. In Estonia, we are revising the system of social guarantees and livelihood for freelance creatives. Our discussion here today on how to tackle global challenges through cultural policies take place in context of unprecedented global instability. Russia's war against Ukraine has deepened the difficulties the cultural sector has had to face throughout the pandemic. It is a blatant violation of international law as well as the UNESCO Constitution and its provision of cultural rights. UNESCO has a vital role as a standard setter through its conventions. It is important for Estonia and to all state parties of the World Heritage Convention that the 45th session of the World Heritage Committee is held in context that allows effective decision-making. Russia's actions in Ukraine, including destruction of cultural heritage, make it conceivable for the upcoming committee meeting to be held under Russian presidency. Every state's moral obligation is to respect the cultural heritage of others. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Excellency. Et maintenant, nous passons la parole à son Excellence, Monsieur Ibrahim Mohamed Awel, ministre du Tourisme, des Arts et de la Culture du Ghana. Monsieur le ministre, la parole est à vous. Vous avez 4 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. President, colleagues, I wish to thank you for this opportunity to address this August gathering from the UNESCO family. I further wish to commend your leadership and that of UNESCO, and the government of Mexico for organizing this historic conference on cultural practices, policies, and sustainable development. I'd like to begin by informing this August gathering that Ghana recognizes culture as a dynamic phenomenon and global public good that has a proclivity, promotes economic development, peace, unity, social justice, reconciliation, human rights, and gender equality. It is in this regard that National Development Plan of Ghana is seeking to place culture at the forefront of Ghana's economic development. To this end, Mr. President, the existing 2004 cultural policy of Ghana, which is currently under review, recognizes culture as an enabler and a driver of socio-economic development. This cultural policy of Ghana received both cabinet and presidential approval and has been in full force for the holistic administration and management of Ghana's tangible and intangible cultural heritage. This cultural heritage is viewed as an asset for national development and for promoting national unity in cultural diversity. For the past 18 years of its promulgation, this policy document has provided a strategic direction for the growth of Ghana's culture. In respect of culture in education, curriculum development, preservation of national heritage, cultural industries, mass media, tourism, mobility of artists, science, technology, and information communication, among others. It has also sustained the momentum for sustainable development of arts, be it visual, performing, or literary, by placing them on local and international pedestal and at the world arts and cultural marketplace. Mr. President, however, the current global challenges, digital revolution, COVID-19 pandemic, and other global challenges attacking both big and small nations have offered us the opportunity to update or review Ghana's cultural policy documents with a view of making it resilient to overcome unexpected storms as and when they occur. This review process will consider regional and global discussions, recommendations, and guidelines. The review will also accommodate modern development trends as a result of our constant interaction with other cultures vis-à-vis globalization, ratification of international conventions, and evolution of the creative arts, pandemics, and their impact on emerging economies. However, Mr. President, Ghana envisions a bottom-up approach involving grassroots participation in the review process. We believe that the future of cultural policy and sustainable development approaches is highly dependent on their integrated value proposition to local communities desiring both should facilitate their well-being and needs. Mr. President, we have proposed that the reviewed and strengthened cultural policy of Ghana should consider the implementation of domestic and international cultural agreements, which binds Ghana to the Committee of Nations and global best practice as well. Ghana has ratified 6 UNESCO conventions. Mr. President, Ghana is implementing the 17 Sustainable Development Goals with over 109 targets, which confirms culture's role as both an enabler and a driver for socio-economic development. In addition, and as a member of the African Union, Ghana has equally prioritized the AU Agenda 2063, which places people and cultures and their heritage at the center of sustainable development. This local global nexus on sustainable development in Ghana and Africa at large provides progress to the policy review. We learn by doing. Therefore, as part of our review process for a renewed and strengthened cultural policy of Ghana, reference will be made to domestic and international cultural agreements, which do not contravene the customary views, laws of Ghana, and the 19th Republic Constitution of Ghana. Ghana's strategic access for the implementation of a renewed and strengthened cultural policy of Ghana in respect of promoting the growth. Mr. President, I wish to conclude by informing you that Ghana is committed to developing an integrated, inclusive, and comprehensive cultural policy framework which will help us develop the culture and creative art sectors of our economy. We must not no longer view culture as a handover of customs and practices from one generation to another, but as a set of powerful tools that can help in socio-economic development. I wish to thank UNESCO for pronouncing Ghana as the capital book city in 2023. I want to leverage that and to thank you all for the opportunity. Thank you and have opportunity.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. La prochaine intervention est celle de Madame Catherine Martin, ministre du Tourisme, de la Culture, des Arts, des Sports et des Médias d'Irlande. Son Excellence n'est pas parmi nous, mais elle va partager une vidéo que nous pourrons voir sans plus tarder.
The representative from Ireland. However, we will have her on video.
I want to thank you for this opportunity to address this important once-in-a-generation conference. I am sorry that I could not be with you in person, but I know that through our collective efforts, we will place culture at the heart of achieving sustainable development. I also wish to thank our hosts, the Government of Mexico. You are not just a leader in cherishing and protecting your precious cultural heritage. You have also long been at the centre of international cultural cooperation. 40 years on, we continue to bear the fruits of the many successes of Mondiacult 1982. Ireland recently celebrated 60 years of its membership of UNESCO. It is a relationship we value dearly. I commend UNESCO for its tireless work in leveraging the power of culture to foster mutual understanding and respect for diversity, build solidarity, and guide us in protecting our cultural and natural heritage. We have come so far, but we can do more. This is the moment to identify how we can renew and strengthen our cultural policies to help us with the many challenges the world faces. Building the resilience of artists, as well as supporting cultural and cultural heritage professionals, must be the centre point of these policies. We must protect and promote artistic freedom of expression. Artists and cultural operators have a critical role in engaging the public on the key challenges of our time. Yet, they are often silenced through lack of recognition, support, and of course, censorship. We must ensure that they have adequate conditions to work and create. In this regard, I wish to highlight that I recently launched a Basic Income for the Arts pilot scheme in Ireland to help address artists' earnings instability and support creative practice. Under the scheme, 2,000 recipients, randomly selected from all art forms, age groups and ethnicities, will be paid €325 a week for a period of 3 years. During this time, I will examine the impact of the scheme on creative practice. I also support increased cross-sectoral cooperation, for example, between culture and education and health policy. Our recent experience in Ireland has demonstrated the benefits for well-being of this approach across various ages and communities. I want to conclude on cultural heritage. We have the honour to be entrusted with the rich heritage of our past to safeguard it for future generations. An attack against the cultural heritage of one of us is an attack against the common heritage of humanity. Ireland strongly condemns the damage to and destruction of Ukraine's cultural heritage. We call on Russia to end its brutal war on Ukraine. There is always a better way. Working together, we can build on our existing strong foundations to renew and strengthen policies for the sustainability of our people and planet. I wish you well for the conference discussions. I'll remain in contact during the conference with Ireland's delegation, headed by our Honourable Ambassador to Mexico.
Nous avons maintenant le plaisir d'entendre Son Excellence, Monsieur Argun Ram Merwal, ministre d'État pour la Culture de l'Inde. Son Excellence, la parole est à vous.
We have the Minister of Islam. You have 4 minutes for your presentation.
Ministers, Excellencies, and colleagues from across the world, Namaskar. At the outset, I express my sincere thanks to the Government of Mexico for hosting us. India appreciates and acknowledges their gesture of friendship shown by way of installing the bust of the outstanding Indian revolutionary scholar and agricultural scientist, Dr. Pandurang Khan Khoje, at the Autonomous University of the Chapingo, the largest public agriculture university of Mexico, and the statue of Swami Vivekananda at the Autonomous University of Hidalgo, the first statue of Swami Vivekananda in Latin America. These would serve as inspirations to the people, especially the youth and coming generations. On behalf of India, I extend warm greeting to all the members joining the Mondiacult conference today. I am honored to be present here in the vibrant Mexico City, where the first milestone Mondiacult conference convened over 40 years ago. India also takes this opportunity to congratulate the UNESCO Secretariat for facilitating this critical global platform to encourage dialogue and global discourse on the future of culture policies in the face of shared contemporary challenges. One of the biggest achievements of the path-breaking Mondiacult conference in 1982 was the redefinition and broadening the concept of culture. The conference established the heritage is a sum total of all values of culture as expressed in everyday life and is not limited to tangible heritage attributes. It's marked a shift in the world's attentions by highlighting the need for preservation of the intangible heritage. Now we have entered the last decade for the implementation of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The Mondiacult Conference is an opportune time for the global community to shape a more robust and resilient culture sector, fully anchored in the perspective of sustainable development as well as need to promote solidarity, peace, and security worldwide. Moreover, as we emerge from one of the worst crises precipitated by the pandemic, the entire international community needs to act as cultural catalyst and arrive at the consensus to overcome the numerous natural and man-made challenges for ensuring the cultural resources are truly organized and realized as global commons. The policies, collaboration, and support base built through the consensus here will pave the way of the full integration of culture as global public good in the past 2030 agenda for an inclusive and sustainable development. Policies for the thematic session, which deal with the policies. With the civilization legacy of more than 5,000 years, India has always is trying to celebrate and promote our diverse cultural fabric to strengthen social cohesion and mutual respect among the present and future generations. Therefore, we fully endorse the international community's focus mainstreaming cultures for the sustainable living. One thing I want to add here, the ethos, the mantra, Vasudev Kutumbakam, which means that the entire world is a family and we are collectively responsible our shared and interconnected histories. India reinforced its commitment to collectively assess at the platform of the role of culture for life and formulation of renewed and strengthened cultural policies for the sustainable development. At the last, I want to end it because so many policies, initiatives we have taken, just like protection and restitution of cultural property, advancement of traditional cultural practice for the sustainable living, promotion of cultural and creative industries for livelihood generation, preservation and dissemination of culture by leverage technology. So I again want to thank Mexico, the government of Mexico, for organizing this conference. I once again thank the government of Mexico for their warm and wonderful hospitality, generosity, and for being a gracious host. Muchas gracias. Namaskar. Jai Hind.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre. De l'Inde, nous passons à la Suisse, avec son Excellence, Monsieur Alain Berset, vice-président de la Confédération suisse et ministre de l'Intérieur, ne vous inquiétez pas, dont dépend la culture.
In the interior, and we have the Minister of Switzerland, Mr. Berset, the Vice President of the Confederation of Minister of Culture. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be here with you, and I would like to mention that our minister doesn't have to do with justice. That is something very specific because we have the part of culture, but we also have health care and all social issues. And we mention here health is because we need to imagine that the Ministry of Culture during the pandemic was something that we had to face. But by having said that, I am very pleased that we are all here and we were all at the opening of this conference. And by looking at the different documents, we see that the last time that we had this formal meeting was in 1982. It has been 40 years. I don't know where you were in 1982, but I was still at school, far from thinking about policies, especially cultural policies, but these can help us to remember that we need to meet more often. So we will pay attention so that next time for Mondiacult will not be in 2062, because definitely many things happen, and actually we would not be able to have a follow-up. I have the privilege of being in charge of healthcare in Switzerland, and that was also during the pandemic. And if we need to see something about the pandemic and impact and culture, we need to say that up to 2020 we thought that artists and culture arrived in a way to be developed and that citizens would be able to get out of these situations. But now we realize that we need to wake up and to wonder what we need to do in a jointly manner. The moment is right now, because the pandemic presents all the digital systems and all those great breakthroughs that we have had in culture through the pandemic. That is an example in the area of music. When I was younger, in music, we needed to buy records and to have a play recorder, and artists who were selling their records. But right now, everything happens online, and this doesn't allow for artists to sell those products, and their concerts are on stage, but the pandemic didn't allow us to have live concerts. Something else which is important is globalization, which had this tend to make our societies to be homogeneous, and that goes against diversity. So that is the opposite of life reality, how to face the real world in recent years and to live globalization without losing our own diversity. And globalization makes us to go to the extreme and to have nationalism, or to really to value the difference and diversity. We could choose between these two, and we will always have that choice. We need to ask ourselves in our countries to make the right choice to reinforce diversity. And also the artists, which is my third point. I know that I'm running out of my time, but as my colleagues mentioned, the pandemic made to see that artists frequently they don't have a social security, for example, in the labor market. So we need to take into account the specificity. I will like to let your music sound, but I will continue. Here we need to take into account the specificity of the cultural world, and also to consider and to know that that cannot be integrated in those policies that we usually have in labor, employment, unemployment. We need to have specific models, and now I will conclude. I will be brief. In 1982, if we remember the world that existed in 1982, try to remember who was the leader of the Soviet Union before Chernobyl accident, or the financial crisis, and before the Berlin Wall collapse. And during that time, the world has changed. We needed to meet more frequently than that. This is my wish, my desire, and to try to implement our policies and not to wait 20 or 30 years to meet again. No. It's not just the role of the UNESCO of that. We need to organize ourselves to have ministerial meetings more frequently in the area of healthcare, and or to meet at least once a year, and if possible even more so. And in cultural meetings, it need to be at least every 2 years, and to have cultural policies in our countries and to do it jointly. Thank you for your patience.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Minister. Now we get to the end of this ministerial panel with Mariana Weinstein, National Director of Culture of Uruguay. You have the floor. Hello, especially to the representatives of the different states and UNESCO authorities. It is a pleasure to share this panel for reflections and exchange. I want to give you regards of the Minister of Culture of Uruguay, Mr. Pablo da Silveira, and on his behalf and mine to congratulate UNESCO and the government of Mexico for this great conference. This is a valuable opportunity that Mondiacult is giving us to meet and to exchange ideas of culture policies in our countries and in the world. Under these transition times left by the pandemic, to work in the development of supporting tools to drive the culture under the pandemic has been a big challenge. Culture was one of the most affected areas. The pandemic showed its weakness and informality, and we don't want to go back to that. We rather want to have new instruments by being renewed and strengthened. In Uruguay, we have fostered initiatives and processes based in the promotions in the value of honesty, administrative transparency, and freedom, which is the base of a democratic culture in the country. Therefore, I have some data that I would like to share with you. Based on the last reports that we have for 2020, Uruguay, it is one of the countries supporting more democracy and also is leading the indicator of the freedom of expression and also the rate of transparency in public institutions. Because of this democratic perspective, we have plurality and artistic expressions based on the diversity of origins that are part of our nation that has different migration streams. And also it has a commitment to the freedom of expression in its deepest sense, allows it to show this territory with 3.5 million inhabitants has a high density of artists and cultural production. That makes us, for one of our priorities is to defend the rights of artists and the preservation of cultural heritage, material and intangible that identify us as a country, and these are strategic resources of Uruguay to have sustainable development. So the management of the cultural ministry is based on public cultural policies, should not only be limited to a specific agenda of activities, nor to define the content that creators should be generating, rather to have conditions for these to happen under framework of creative freedom and transparency of using public resources. How can we renew and strengthen our cultural policies? Well, the pandemic showed us the importance of art and culture for societies, for them to be resilient. This is basic for this to happen. We need to develop legislative frameworks to promote the continuity of cultural policies, to foster cross-sectionally of cultural activities in all the areas of the state, having culture as the driver of development, to have culture throughout all the territory. It's indispensable to have access to cultural rights for all citizens, and also to promote international exchange by following the foreign affairs framework of Uruguay. This is the moment, as it happened 40 years ago in this same place, to take this new commitment to work together and to design an authentic map of needs and to generate innovative and sustainable ideas before these new challenges. Thank you so much. Thank you, ministers, for your participations. Now we would like to give the floor to the observers. I would like to start with Your Excellency Maria Rosario Jackson, Chair of the National Endowment for the Arts.
The floor is yours.
You have the floor.
Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. It's a privilege to be here with you all today. Thank you to UNESCO for bringing us together, and to the government of Mexico, thank you for your warm hospitality. It is a delight for me to leave some thoughts with you as the lead for the delegation of the United States here at Mondiacult. So I'm the chair of the National Endowment for the Arts, which is a national grant-making and resource for the arts in the United States. Our role is to ensure that all Americans have access to and benefit from the arts. I stepped in this position with a career dedicated to advancing the role of the arts as a healthy community, in healthy communities. The arts are essential to building opportunity-rich communities. I think that in order to truly unleash the power of the arts, it's most important to understand that they cannot exist in isolation, in a silo, but rather they're connected to a number of other areas of policy and practice. What I know for sure is that at their most impactful, the arts and culture are often woven through what I think of as our civic infrastructure. And that is those mechanisms and relationships that we rely on to care for each other. So as my colleagues here have said earlier today, the arts are not extra. As someone steeped in the fields of urban planning and comprehensive community development, what I know for sure is that without the arts, we can't do our best work in building communities where all people can thrive. Prior to stepping into my role at the National Endowment for the Arts, I had the privilege of serving as co-chair for the County of Los Angeles Cultural Equity and Inclusion Initiative. And this is an important effort in a county that is the largest in the United States with 10 million people. One of the fruits of that effort was the creation of a county-wide cultural policy. And what I think is so interesting and important about this particular policy is that it is determined that it isn't only the responsibility of the Department of Arts and Culture to steward our cultural vitality, but the responsibility of all departments within the county. So that includes health, transportation, parks and recreation. All of those are implicated in making sure that arts and culture is strong throughout. So this sensibility is something that I bring to my role at the national level. The appreciation for the interdependence of the fields, aside from arts and culture, in bringing us to where we need to be as a nation and really as a world. So in closing, I invite you to consider a couple of critically important questions with me. One is, what do healthy arts and cultural ecosystems that lead to more just and equitable communities require? And how does this connect to other realms of policy and practice? And as we reflect on what we've learned in the last few years and what we continue to learn, what beliefs and ways of working do we keep? What do we alter? What do we shed? And how do we not go back to business as usual when we know we can do better? So I'm encouraged by what we might do and learn together as global citizens, and as we pause to reflect on our examined experience. Thank you.
Merci, Madame. Nous appelons maintenant Son Excellence Monsieur Georges.
Thank you. Now we would like to call Mr. George Rebelo Pinto Chicote, Secretary General of the Organization of African and Caribbean and Pacific States. You have 2 minutes.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, permettez-moi tout d'abord
Your
d'exprimer mes
Excellencies,
remerciements
ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to thank,
permettez-moi d'exprimer mes remerciements de notre
on behalf of
organisation
another
à l'UNESCO,
organization,
à Son Excellence, Monsieur le Président
thank you
López Obrador,
UNESCO. Thank you, President López Obrador. Thank you, authorities and the citizens of the beautiful Mexico City. Thank you very much for your warmth. Thank you very much for having us. I represent the OACPS with 79 member states and the ministers of culture of the OACPS with the adoption of policies in the arena of culture by means of collaboration, South Triangular, during the 10th summit of our organization to be held in 2022 in Uganda. This summit will echo the declaration stemming from Mondiacult 2022 that will be the driving force for culture as a public good globally and for policies in favor of cultural rights and even to fight against illegal trafficking of cultural goods. With our traditional allies, particularly the European Union, we aim efforts through culture to fight poverty. The OACPS tends to move the diaspora across the world because that is quite a challenge for the development of countries of origin and countries of destination, and that is a goal for all of us, where the notion is to have a draft for a cultural project. Thank you very much to all of you.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, chers
Your
participants, merci
Excellencies,
beaucoup pour vos
ministers,
interventions
ladies and gentlemen,
sur
thank
ce
you very
panel
much
autour du
for
renouvellement et du
your
renforcement des
insights in
politiques
this panel
culturelles.
for
Je
the
vous invite
renewal
à
and
rester dans la
reinforcement
salle
of
puisque la
cultural
deuxième session
policies.
qui va
Please
suivre, la
stick
deuxième session
around because the
ministérielle
next
qui va suivre sera
session, that is
également
the
sur cette
second
même thématique.
ministerial
Merci à tous, merci Mesdames et
session,
Messieurs
will
et
also
excellente fin
be
de journée.
about the same, around the same topic. So thank you very much and hope that you will have a wonderful session, remaining session.